what are we going over today? So first I'm going to talk about why I want to teach, then my experience in the educational system, what I've learned from that experience, and the educational system itself. So, why do I want to teach? I think the real question is, why is education important in the first place? I think that's because we are trying to create a better world. I think that we can all agree that that's kind of our goal. And that is because the next generation of society is going to be going through our classrooms. And I always explain this as Obama and Trump, and who do you want to run the world next? And because they went through someone's classroom, many people's classrooms, and I think that all of their teachers molded them somehow in the way that they ended up. And I also think that it's very important because as teachers we are fostering, in my opinion, 4 very key concepts. And that is open-mindedness, resilience and self-regulation, leadership and creativity. So, my story, this is the juicy bit. So I was a problem child, or as Stuart would say, I was not a bad kid, but I had some misbehavioral tendencies. So I was first expelled in Montessori at the age of 4. Yes, some of your faces are going kind of crazy here. I wasn't an axe murderer, I promise you. But yeah, so what happened was, the story was someone stepped on my sandcastle, and I flipped out and got violent. And don't worry, that's not what I'm like anymore, I've learned my lesson. And so I was expelled from there, and then also again in grade 1. And then I actually ended up moving to Alliston, where I spent the rest of my life, up until this point really. And there were several severe stress-related behavioral problems until I got to the 3rd grade. I was also diagnosed with ADHD, and I had multiple suspensions, even afterwards of grade 3, but less so. And the reason why I was only up until grade 3 was because one teacher changed the direction of my life forever, and that was Mrs. Conant. And the biggest thing for me up until that point was she was the only one who didn't give up on me. And because a lot of what happened was I was stuck in a cycle of I didn't feel very good about myself, and I have some problems at home, as a lot of us do. And I took that out in the classroom and tried to get attention, and I was angry. And what would happen is they would just scold me and suspend me or expel me. And she was the first one who didn't do that. She showed me a lot of compassion. And she even told my parents that she had never met anyone like me before. And there was something unique about the way I thought and behaved. And the funny thing is, this is something that I've seen in my life over and over and over, is that I always needed to know why. I couldn't just take orders. I couldn't just be a good boy. I always needed to know why we were doing what we were doing. And it's still like that today. And I realized I wanted to be a teacher in the 11th grade. And this was actually, I was sitting with my cousin and my mother, who's right here. And at this point in grade 11, no one really knows what they want to do in life. So they just said, you'd be a good teacher? And I went, cool, I'll be a teacher. And one of the reasons was because they said that there's a shortage of geography teachers in North America. I'm not sure if that's completely true. But they said that, and I was like, cool, I don't really know what else I want to do, so I'll do that. And there were 2 teachers that really inspired me. The first was my grade 10 history teacher, and her name was Mrs. Wright. And the funny thing about that is that up until that point, I hated history. I remember grade 6, I dreaded social studies like crazy. So if you're teaching grade 6 social studies, hopefully you're better than my teacher. And I remember what I didn't like was that it was just facts, names, and dates. There was no real storytelling. There was no reason, emotional involvement. I didn't feel like it mattered to me at all. I was just memorizing things that I didn't care about. And also I didn't do too well in the course, that's probably why as well. But what she had a load of passion. She was an incredibly passionate person. And she would just tell stories. So all she would do, she'd just tell stories. She'd have conversations with us. And I remember I used to go home every single day after school and run into my grandparents' house, because they actually lived with us. And I would just talk about history and World War II for hours and hours and hours. And I was blown away by it, and how someone like Adolf Hitler could do the things he could do. So that's why she was one of the biggest inspirations, because she was just so passionate, and it's really made my life a different entity, really. And the second one was a bit more interesting. My grade 11 philosophy teacher. His name was Mr. Morrison, and he was a very unique person. I always explain him as, you don't think, he's one of those guys where you don't think they exist outside the classroom. Like, you go to the store and you just can't think you'd ever run into him. It's like he's an entity of himself. And one thing he had was he had a lot of humor. He was always making jokes. He had this sock puppet, and he'd just talk to you with the sock puppet. He was weird, but everyone loved him. And he also had a very unique seating structure. Instead of everyone in rows, what he would have is like a horseshoe. And he would just sit in the middle of the horseshoe and he'd just talk to us. He'd just have conversation with us. Kind of like Mrs. Wright, but in a much more unique way with a sock puppet. And yes, pretty much that's one thing I loved about it, was just we had conversations every single day. And he'd just talk for 20 minutes, and then we'd just have debates, discussions for the rest of the time. And he really would only say something if he needed to change the conversation, if he wanted to add anything that we were kind of being stumped on. And that was incredible, because I didn't know that as a teacher you could change the structure of teaching so much. And he also had a very interesting exam structure. What he would do was, he would just tell you to write. He'd be like, what did you learn in this course? And that's very unique, obviously. Most people write a whole bunch of questions and you just kind of tell them what they want to hear. But he was like, no, I want to know what you think about this. What do you think about the nature of time, the nature of space, love? These concepts that a lot of us don't think about very often. And that was incredible for me, and I want to bring that to my classroom in the future. Also, he would do this thing called the agenda. And he would, every single day, he would type out this agenda, this thing that we were going to do that day, and he would get a different person every single day to read off the agenda. And it would just go around the classroom. So he wouldn't ask for hands. He'd just go, all right, like Samantha, you're tomorrow, James, you're the next day. And everyone felt appreciated and special in that classroom because he made sure that everyone was doing something every single day. And the last one was probably the most interesting of all the things he did. He had these daily greetings. And it didn't matter if it was in the summer or the winter. He would stand outside the classroom every single day, and he would shake every single person's hand in the classroom. And he just had a conversation with you for sometimes 30 seconds, sometimes 2 minutes. And he just asked you how your day was going, how your life was going, how hockey was going, how your parents were doing. And the cool thing about that is that he was actually able to get the stoners to come to class. So these were people that I didn't know they actually went to school because I've never seen them in class before. So I was like, whoa, these are all new people. And yeah, they would come every single day. And they would skip every other class. And I just thought that was incredible. And, like, he was like a martyr. Like, these people loved him. They would come to every class. And when they would graduate, they'd come back. Like 3 years later, they'd repeatedly come back and just do like guest appearances in the class. And I thought he was an incredible teacher. And he's been a huge source of inspiration for me. And just changing up the way that I see education, the way that I view kids. And students of all ages, really. And so what have I learned from these experiences? And something that I know Stuart said is that you never know who someone will become. I know if I was to describe myself to my grade 1 or 2 teacher and be like, is this Anton? He'd be like, no way, that he's in jail right now. So it's like, do not give up on students that seem difficult, because you never know with a bit of effort who they could become. And I did this, I had worked at Camp Muskoka before, I don't know if anyone knows where that is, but it's a brilliant camp, and I was one of the Eagle's Nest camp counselors, and there was this one kid in the class, or in the camp, and this was around 14 and 15 years old, I think he was like 13 to 15 years old, and he was like a troublemaker, but he was also a leader, like all the kids looked up to him, so if you told the kids what to do, and he told them something else, they would go with him. So we kind of had a discussion, all of us, not with him, but all the counselors, we thought, like, how can we do this? Like, this guy's kind of derailing our entire mode of operation. So I had an idea. I was like, okay, I'll just talk to him, be real with him. So I took him aside one day and I said, hey man, you're a leader and you're a really strong personality, and honestly, like, I could use some help. So I said, how about you be like my right-hand man, and whenever I need you to help me do something, you do it. And he was like, cool. So he did it. And what was incredible is that he was like the kid I hated the most. I didn't hate him, I just wasn't a huge fan. And by the end of the week, I was like crying to see him go. I was like, this kid's awesome. Like, he was such a help. And like everyone looked up to him, and in a lot of ways, like he kind of found his purpose. And I think that's a good metaphor for just students, is like we need to make sure that they have a purpose. And they will really try hard if they find a reason to try hard, really. And so I really truly believe that in that case, sometimes the worst students are the ones who go on to make the biggest difference. And a lot of the time it's because they challenge the status quo. They choose what they're going to do, they won't be told, including myself. And so I think that we should really kind of open it up to students and really have them, work with them and really be like, what do you want to get out of your school education? Obviously, like, Stuart thinks you can do this to a 3-year-old. I don't know. I was more thinking older. Like, I obviously did this presentation a few months ago, so Stuart's information is kind of like new in my head. And some other things I realized was some of the reasons for my own stress behavior were 3 big things that I think there could be other stuff going on in the background, but 3 things I can actually look at. And that is, I was angry, I had a lot of creative suppression, and lack of attention, and I just wanted attention. So I would, talk and interrupt people, and once that grade 3 teacher, Mrs. Kahn, kind of figured that out, she really, gave me attention, so I didn't really need it, and I didn't need to destroy the classroom to get it. And now bringing this into the classroom. So these multiple lessons from childhood and my own research, I kind of figured out the importance and understanding of cultivating leadership, resilience, conditioning, creativity. So leadership is the first one. So I think that as teachers, we're all role models, or we should try to be, I think. And I think we should be people where the students understand that it is in their best interest to learn from us. So don't be like, you need to learn this is going to be valuable. Like, show them why it's valuable. Be someone where they look up to you and they're like, oh, like I want to be like, Mr. Czachor or Mrs. Conant. And they will listen because they'll be like, I want to be like that. And another way to garner that inspiration is through respect. And I know myself is I never was inspired by people who I didn't think respected me, and I didn't respect them. So I think it's very important to respect your students. And hopefully I think we all do that. But just, keep it up, and for the people that don't, and the other teachers, remind people of that. And I really think that people need appreciation, not just students, but all of us. I think everybody needs appreciation. We need to feel special and appreciated. And because we all have gifts, and they just come in different ways. So some of us are very structured thinkers. We think very linearly. And others are very creative, and it's more branching. And you talk to someone like this, and you have a conversation about gardening, and then it ends up about politics. It's like, that's how you're talking to a very creative person, is their mind is just constantly making these connections with everything you're talking about, and they get bored really quickly. So they just want to keep jumping different conversation topics. And also people obviously bring high energy. That's a gift. Not everyone has to be super academically intelligent. Some people are just high energy, fun. Some people are just geniuses, but not in the way that we'd expect. And then others are just very athletic, and there are the people that we watch play sports, and these people get paid millions of dollars to play sports. So, and we all love it, and we wouldn't have it any other way. So just gifts come in very different forms. And I also think that a big aspect of leadership is humility and authenticity. And because we all trust those who can admit their faults. I know myself, I trust people who can tell me when they're wrong. It's the people that think they're perfect that I have a hard time trusting. And I think it's very important that a good leader makes you understand that they still feel fear. It's just they can still act in the face of it. And they inspire others to do the same. And I remember I was blown away. I saw an interview with Ed Sheeran, who probably everyone knows. And he said something interesting. He's like, after playing Wembley Stadium, I still get nervous playing every single one of my shows. And at that point, I was like, I idolized him. I thought he was like a hero. He was this incredible person. And I was like, that guy isn't afraid of anything. Like, there's no way after you play to 1 million people or 500,000 people, a few 100,000 people, that you could ever get nervous talking in front of others. But I was like, no, when we care about something, we get nervous about it. We want it to work out well. And I think that a leader makes others comfortable around failure. And as teachers, we all have to be leaders and do all these things. And something I was thinking about too is that leaders, you don't have to change the world. I think that we just have to change one person at a time and inspire those people to change other people. Like, we don't have to change the world all by ourselves, because that's pretty intense, and I don't think that anyone can really do that. We just suck it under the weight of that idea. Yeah, we just have to inspire others to continue this. And then I think a really good quote about this is by Anton Czachor. He said that management is doing things right, and leadership is doing the right things. So you're not always doing things right, you're just always just trying to do the right thing. And the second aspect I think is very important is resilience. And this is where our entire thing comes into self-regulation. And I think forgiveness is a massive aspect of resilience. That's probably something that you didn't think about when you think of resilience, you think of being tough. But I think forgiveness is very important to that, because we bring our past resentments into our future and they end up destroying our future. And we have to let go of that. And I think that the only way to let go of that is to forgive the people that have wronged us. And I know it's hard, and I'm doing all these seminars trying to better myself and let go, because it's super difficult. And I think that courage is a big aspect of that. I think it's very important to teach people how to be courageous, because that's everything. It's like, you can't love if you're afraid of loving. You can't do things well if you're afraid of doing things well. And fear dictates how we live our lives. So if you're afraid of something, you're going to avoid it. And life is full of opportunities, so all the opportunities that you're afraid of, you're just never going to take. So it's very important to teach people how to be courageous, so you can still be scared, just still try things that are new. And I think that failure is a critical component of success. Obviously, I think it was Malcolm Gladwell who said that mastering anything takes 10,000 hours. Yeah. And it's you're not gonna master that thing the first time you do it. It takes failure. You're gonna fail. You're gonna have to try again for those 10,000 hours. So I just don't think that we really do that. I know that in my past experience in this school, I don't think that really worked for me. I was terrified of failing. That was really scary for me. It's the reason why I worked so hard to get those A's in math, because I didn't want to bring my report card and show my dad I got a C, because that didn't go very well. And then I also think that you can't really avoid life's tragedies. I think that, but they are opportunities for growth. And it kind of brings me back to this idea of let kids fall over and get a bruise, because we're going to get bruised over and over and over and over in our lives. We have to make sure that we do it well. And I know I used to do Taekwondo. It was a form of martial arts. And I remember at the time I didn't really think it was important, but I remember they taught us how to fall. And they do that when you're skating too. They teach you how to fall. And I was like, what's the point? I just want to punch people. And but yeah, looking back, it's really important to learn how to fall. And I don't know if anyone knows the next quote, but it's why do we fall? So we can learn to pick ourselves up. And that is from Batman Begins. Alfred, yeah. I didn't want to write it down just in case anyone knew that. But yeah, I just think that's a phenomenal quote. I think it's incredible to get out of a Batman movie. But yeah, it's we fall and we learn how to pick ourselves up. We do this hopefully early in our lives and not have to learn this later in life. And here we go to self-regulation, why we're really here today in the next 3 days. And because it's really important not to repress or suppress emotional pain, because I know for myself, it does not go away, it just hides in our subconscious minds and ends up, it comes out in relationships, people you love, all the things you're afraid of, all the things you're angry about, you think that they're gone, but really they end up just pushing you from your loved ones. And I think that personally, I think this really results in a lot of substance abuse and addiction in our society. Because, we all carry around that pain, but we just don't know we're really carrying it around. So I think it's very important to teach students the self-regulation processes, because they can be very difficult to learn by yourself. And I think that's why, we go to therapists. Not to say they're wrong or anything, therapists are fantastic, but it's really hard to learn by ourselves. And I always say weightlifting is difficult, but at the same time, I think emotional weightlifting is a lot harder. And I know that students cannot learn if they're struggling mentally. If you're being abused at home, or bad things, if your parents are getting divorced at home, it's learning that math equation is the last thing on your mind. And I also think that if we really get better self-regulation, it may diminish our need for counseling. And this is a quote that my dad told me, actually, I thought it was really good, by William Arthur Ward, and he said that the person who risks nothing does nothing, has nothing, is nothing. He may avoid suffering and sorrow, but he cannot learn, feel, change, grow, or live. And the third one is conditioning. And this is something that I know Stuart really echoed in his presentation. But I think we need to help students understand their conditioning, because we all view reality through subjective lenses, and those that have been molded by us and from the world for us. And it kind of makes me think about the idea of free will. Like, does it really exist if, all our past experiences mold us and make us, make a decision before we think we're making a decision. We think that, we're turning right because we want to turn right, but like maybe that we turned right because of something that happened 10 years ago. And so we carry all this past baggage, knowledge, and experiences, and they create the lens that we view reality through. And it becomes our identity. And not to say it's wrong, it's just I think it's very important to understand that that is a lens. That we didn't choose that, it chose us. And something I thought about is, at the end of the day, no teacher or person will change you, but they'll give you the tools, optimism, and confidence to change yourself. And that's something that I used to think. I used to think I could change people, and people could change me, and they could help me. But at the end of the day, they can't really change you or help you. They just give you the tools and the confidence to change yourself. They give you support so you can change yourself. And I also think that's very important to help students and us really at any time in our lives to know what we want in life, because life's always presenting us with opportunities, but if we don't know what we want, we won't really see them as opportunities. They'll just pass us by and we'll never really jump at them or grab them. And this is a quote I love by Carl Jung, one of my favorite psychologists. And he said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you'll call it fate." That was very thought-provoking. But yeah, it's like if you don't know your unconscious mind, like, a lot of us are, religious or superstitious, and, we think it's fate that we're going to fall to, but maybe it's just all the things that happen to us lead us in one direction. And the last one was creativity. And I watched a TED Talk with Ken Robinson. He had a very interesting perspective on creativity. And he said that it is possessing original ideas with value. And I'm not sure if I agree with him completely, because of the nature of, like, what does value mean? Does that value to society, value to yourself? But at the end of the day, I think that's just what it is, possessing original ideas with value. That could just be to yourself. Like, you could find your creativity values you. Maybe if the world doesn't really see that, that's fine. And I think that intelligence is very diverse, and the idea of like the 7 intelligences kind of echoes that. And that young students have an extraordinary ability to create and innovate. And I think we don't really give them credit for that. Young students are very brilliant because they haven't really been molded in that way yet, so they can see the world more or less for like what it is. And I think it's very important to foster creativity and not stifle it. And I think ADHD is a very interesting phenomenon for a few reasons. So these 3 people, Nigahiga, if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, he's a YouTuber who I used to watch like 10 years ago. And he's kind of a YouTube comedian, and he has ADHD. And I remember he was doing like a Draw My Life thing. And he was explaining that growing up, he used to think that his ADHD was a huge detriment to him. And he's like, I wish I was normal, I wish I didn't have ADHD. But he's like, growing up, and now 10 years later, he's noticed that the only reason why he's still successful is because he has ADHD. And he's so creative. And he explained his thought pattern process, because I was like, how can someone 10 years later have so many ideas? Like, he's posting videos like weekly. And it's like a lot of people, directors, make movies like once a year. Like, he's making new ideas all the time. And he's like, the way my mind works is I think of one thing, and then it just keeps jumping to other avenues. And he's like, that's the reason why I'm so successful. And then also pop sensations Adam Levine of Maroon 5 and Justin Bieber also have ADHD. And they've been on record saying that they obviously, I think they take like drugs sometimes to calm it down, but for the most part, I don't think they have it any other way, because it helps them get new ideas all the time. So I think that ADHD and all these different ways of being can be assets and liabilities. And that everyone has gifts, and ADHD may be the price we pay for creativity, or some of us. And in a timeline of my creativity, so at the age of 4, right around the time I got expelled, I remember my mom always used to tell me, she's like, I was a very curious person. She'd always tell me like, oh, wait here, Anton, and then she'd turn around and I'd be somewhere else looking at something else. I was just very creative and curious. I was always trying to figure out how things worked, and I was looking at different things. And then in grade 1, I started like writing and illustrating comic books. And I was always just writing, and you know, I created like the Adventures of Macaroni Man and Pizza Boy, I think. And it's still foggy, I can't remember it too well. And then in grade 3, I won a science award. But then in grade 12, I enrolled myself in a creative writing course. And this was really interesting because I completely forgot how to write dialogue. I remember I was stressing out. I was like, how do you write people thinking? Like, you know, how do you do that? And the thing is, like, I was so used to being told exactly how to write, how to do things, that when someone was just like, just write a book, write a short story, I just like completely forgot how to do that. And I'll get into that a bit more later, but I think that like just being told so strictly how to do things really kind of impacted me in my life. And I've been really regaining that as I get older and trying to like retain that creativity and figure out my own way to do things. And so I think the goal of education really is philosophical in nature. And it's to develop our personalities and free ourselves from our default way of being. And also to progress or maintain society, and also develop the ability for critical evaluation skills. And I also think that all breakthroughs come from challenging the status quo. And we echo this with all, like, you know, Elon Musk with Tesla. It's like he didn't create these technologies by thinking the way that other people told him to think. He pretty much said, like, F you to the world. And he's like, I'm going to do it my way. I'm going to save the world my way. So I think that, you know, a lot of creativity is really thinking outside the box and teaching students how to do that as well. And getting into the modern educational system, I think that in a lot of ways is quite brilliant. I think it teaches very useful information. And one of my favorites that really sticks out to me is the idea of state something in your own words. And when I was younger and people were always saying state in your own words, state in your own words, I was like, it kind of just became a word. It's like when you say your name over and over and over again, it starts to become meaningless. It's kind of like state in your own words. They say it so often, they never really explain why. But really, I think it's brilliant because to be able to state something in your own words is the most efficient way to retain knowledge. And as I know with habits, like when we incorporate habits into our life, we can only really make them our own and incorporate them into our life when we understand them for how they impact us, not how they impact someone else. And so I think that the modern educational system is really great, but the reason behind some of the things it teaches is really underemphasized. And I also think that failure should be embraced rather than potentially stigmatized. And I don't think that the system really stigmatizes failure in itself, but the way that it's kind of resulted is that it does in a way, like, you know, usually by parents. It's like, you know, we're always telling our kids, you know, get those A's, get those A's. And it's like we train our kids to just constantly achieve the greatest perfection. And it's like once someone gets a C, it's like, why do you get a C? And it's like, you know, maybe they just didn't really get it that time. So, and you know, I know myself, I became very scared of getting C's. I remember in grade 5, I knew I had a really bad report card, so I ended up actually stealing someone else's report card and bringing it home. And then my mom and my dad took me out to get ice cream, and we went out to dinner. And then I was like, man, they really haven't like read the actual name on the report card yet. And I remember they woke me up the next morning and they're like, this is Stephanie's report card. I was like, oh, really? I guess I got the wrong one. At least I got my ice cream now. And so yeah. So I think that like in a roundabout way, the system kind of conditions us to avoid failure. I think that it can really embrace failure in the future. I also think that it relies very heavily on memorization and regurgitation. And I think that can result in some negative things, especially with boredom and misbehavior. I know that when you're just told how to do something and you're not really allowed that creativity and that decision making, you kind of get bored and then you end up talking to your buddy beside you. So I think it's very important that we really open that up and like ask, you know, open it up to the student. Because also, like I said about the grade 12 course, it really impeded my decision making, because it created like a lack of autonomy within me. I just was so used to being told exactly how to do things that I forgot, you know, my own voice and how I was going to do things. And it also, in turn, killed my motivation to learn, because it kind of dwindled my innate curiosity and my ability to make a mark. Because I think as human beings, that's really what we want to do. We want to make a mark on the world. And I think the school system right now, or maybe not right now, but when I was in school, it really kind of, it didn't have that. it didn't let me really make a mark, bring my own voice into things. It was always, okay, like, what did I tell you about the War of 1812? I want it written about how I told you that way. And also, I think it's very based on 19th century ideals of the Industrial Revolution, where practicality was really more important than creativity. And even the decision to group students based on age came out of that time, because we wanted them to grow at the same time so they could get out of school and then work in the factory system. And many brilliant creative people think their gifts are useless. And I think the school system also really looks for a certain commodity, and that's really academic knowledge over emotional knowledge. And that's at a self-regulation conference like we're at now, I think we're really learning at this time in history, really, and it's going to be history, the importance of emotional knowledge, and that self-regulation process is super important. And I thought this was a really good quote. It was from a Peanuts comic strip, and Linus said the difference between A students and F students is that A students forget information 5 minutes after the test, while F students 5 minutes before. That was a pretty bang-on assessment of testing, and the standardized testing that some of us love and some of us hate. And here's a quote from the man himself, Ken Robinson. He says that we are educating people out of their creative capacities. I believe this passionately, that we don't grow into creativity, we grow out of it, or rather we are educated out of it.
Yep.
So in my opinion, I would like to see the future of education have a variety of teaching styles, where those visual learners, those kinesthetic learners, these different types of people who learn different ways are all accommodated. And because really, like, in terms of the world, I think we need all kinds of people. I know that me and Amy were talking about this when we were trying to look for something to say connected to God, I believe, in that thing. And we decided to do the wind. And we were like, yeah, that's cool and abstract. And then Allison over here was like, yeah, I picked a tree. And then we kind of thought about it, and we were like, oh, you know, that's a very practical way of looking at it. It's not wrong or right, it's just different. And then we were obviously a bit more abstract, and we were thinking about how it's like a metaphor for life itself and God. But it's like, if everyone was philosophers, no practical things would get done. But if everyone was practical, no one would really know what to be practical with. So I think all these kinds of people are really needed. We need to cultivate all these different kinds of things in our students. I also think it would be great to have an inquiry-based approach to learning, such as the Scandinavian private school system, because they're kind of famous for that guided learning. And I think it's very important to teach students how to learn and guide them into what they want to learn. And to do this, a more open curriculum that students use to strengthen their abilities. So instead of a blanket curriculum where we're like, all students need to know the same things, maybe more specific curriculum where they really bring their own opinion into it. And obviously, I don't think that it has to be completely specific, because of course we have a blind spot, so we don't really know all the knowledge. So it'd kind of be a disservice to just be like, oh, well, just let 3-year-olds tell us what to believe in. But I think there needs to be a conjoining of those two avenues of thought. And that is my presentation. Thank you very much for listening.